The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord Station was the most beautiful place Thomas Reeve had ever seen. Crystal pillars rose from the floor like frozen waterfalls. Lights floated in the air without any visible support. The ceiling showed the actual stars outside, making everyone feel like they were standing in space itself. Thomas took a deep breath and adjusted his simple black suit. 3 years. It had taken him 3 years of training, studying, and working to reach this moment. Tonight, Earth would officially become a member of the galactic community. Tonight, humanity would take its first real step into the larger universe. He was only 34 years old, young for an ambassador. But the selection committee had seen something in him, a calmness that others lacked, a patience that seemed unusual for his species. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as emotional creatures, quick to anger, quick to act. Thomas Reeve was different. Around him, delegates from 17 different species mingled and talked. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Thomas had to remind himself not to stare. There were beings made of living rock, creatures that floated instead of walked, entities that seemed to exist as clouds of colored gas. And then there were the Sarath. Thomas had studied the Sarath extensively. They were one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Their empire had conquered hundreds of worlds over 10,000 years. They stood 8 feet tall, with scales that shimmered in colors of purple and blue. Their eyes were golden, and their faces showed no warmth. The Sarath had voted against humanity's admission to the Concord. They had argued that humans were too primitive, too aggressive, too short-lived to deserve a place among the elder races. They had lost that vote, but only barely. Thomas watched as High Commandant Valeth moved through the crowd. She was the highest-ranking Sarath official present, a military leader who had commanded fleets in dozens of campaigns. Her scales were darker than the others, almost black, and she wore ceremonial armor that probably cost more than Thomas would earn in his entire lifetime. Their eyes met across the room. Thomas offered a polite nod of acknowledgement. Valeth's expression did not change. She simply stared at him for a long moment, then turned away. The ceremony began an hour later. Thomas stood at the front of the hall, while the Concord speaker, an ancient being called an axiom, who appeared to be made entirely of living crystal, read the formal declaration. Earth was now officially recognized. Humanity had arrived. Applause filled the hall. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. His parents back on Earth were probably watching this broadcast. His sister, his old teachers, everyone who had believed in him. The applause faded. The speaker invited delegates to offer words of welcome. Several species came forward with kind messages. The Velthari, small and gentle beings with large eyes, spoke of hoping for friendship. The Keth collective, insectoid creatures who communicated through clicking sounds, expressed interest in trade. Each message was brief and formal, but Thomas appreciated them all. Then Valeth stepped forward. The hall grew quiet. Everyone knew the Sarath had opposed this ceremony. Everyone wondered what their representative would say. Valeth looked at Thomas. She did not blink. "I have studied your species," she began. Her voice was deep and cold, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "I have examined your history, your biology, your capabilities, and I find myself confused." She paused. The silence stretched. "I am confused why the Concord has chosen to admit vermin." A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Thomas felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his expression neutral. Valeth continued. "Your species crawled out of the mud only moments ago by galactic standards. You have barely mastered basic spaceflight. Your bodies are weak, fragile, easily broken. A Sarath child could kill your strongest warrior with one hand." She stepped closer to Thomas. They were only 3 feet apart now. "Your lifespans are pathetically short. 70 years? 80? I have uniforms older than your entire civilization. By the time you learn anything of value, you die and leave your ignorant children to repeat your mistakes." Thomas said nothing. He simply listened. "Your military capacity is laughable. Your technology is primitive. Your understanding of galactic politics is that of an infant trying to comprehend the movements of stars. Valeth's golden eyes bore into him. "You do not belong here. You have not earned the right to stand among us. You are an embarrassment to this institution, and everyone in this room knows it." She leaned closer. Her breath was cold on his face. "Go back to your tiny, irradiated rock, human. Play with your simple toys. Pretend you matter. But know this, you will never be our equals. Not in 1,000 years. Not in 10,000. You are nothing, and nothing is all you will ever be." The hall was absolutely silent. Every eye watched Thomas. Cameras from a dozen news networks recorded every moment. This broadcast would be seen on hundreds of worlds before the night was over. Thomas looked at Valeth. He saw the expectation in her golden eyes. She wanted him to react. She wanted anger, outrage, a heated response that would prove everything she had said about human emotions. She wanted a scene that would shame his species before the entire galaxy. He understood all of this in a single heartbeat. Thomas took a slow breath. He straightened his suit jacket. He gave Valeth a small, polite nod, the same nod he had offered her across the room earlier. Then he turned around and walked away. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. He did not hurry. He did not look back. He simply walked, calm and steady, until he reached the exit doors. Behind him, the murmurs began. By morning, those murmurs would echo across 100 worlds. High Commandant Valeth stood alone in the great hall for a long moment after the human left. Her golden eyes stared at the doors through which he had disappeared. Around her, the other delegates whispered to each other in dozens of different languages. This was not what she had planned. For 300 years, Valeth had served the Seraph Dominion. She had commanded warships. She had conquered planets. She had broken the spirits of countless enemies through fear and intimidation. She knew exactly how to make someone lose control, insult their honor, mock their strength, challenge their pride in front of others. Every species in the galaxy responded the same way. They would shout. They would threaten. They would make foolish mistakes that could be used against them later. But the human had done nothing. He had simply walked away. Valeth returned to her quarters that night, feeling something she had not felt in decades. She was uncertain. She had thrown her sharpest words at the human ambassador, and he had treated them like gentle rain on stone. No anger. No tears. No desperate defense of his species. Just a polite nod and a calm departure. What kind of creature did that? Thomas Reeve sat in his small embassy office the next morning, drinking coffee and reading reports. His assistant, a young woman named Sarah Chen, stood in the doorway with wide eyes. "Sir, have you seen the news?" she asked. Thomas nodded calmly. "I have seen some of it. It is everywhere. Every channel. Every network. Every planet with a communication system is talking about what happened last night." Sarah stepped into the office, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. "The Seraph are furious. They expected you to react. They had response plans prepared for every possible outburst. But you gave them nothing to work with." "One." Thomas took another sip of his coffee. "That was the idea." Sarah shook her head in amazement. "How did you stay so calm? The things she said about us, about humanity, they were terrible." Thomas was quiet for a moment. He looked out the small window at the stars beyond the station. "When I was young," he said slowly, "my grandfather taught me something important. He said that when someone tries to make you angry, they are trying to control you. Your anger becomes their weapon. The only way to win is to refuse to give them that weapon." He turned back to Sarah with a small smile. "High Commandant Valeth wanted me to be angry. She needed me to be angry. So I chose not to be." Sarah looked at him with new respect. "What happens now?" "Now," Thomas said, "we wait and watch, and we do our jobs." The galactic media could not stop talking about the incident. Commentators from every species analyzed the footage again and again. They studied Valeth's aggressive posture, her cruel words, her expectation of victory, and they studied Thomas, his steady breathing, his neutral expression, his dignified exit. "Remarkable composure," said a Velthari news anchor. I have never seen anyone respond to a Sarith challenge in such a way. The human showed no fear, observed a Keth collective analyst. This is unexpected. We believed humans to be emotionally unstable. This evidence suggests otherwise. A masterful diplomatic move, declared a commentator from the Rithani Federation. By refusing to engage, the human ambassador made the High Commandant look foolish. She was prepared for battle, but her opponent simply left the battlefield. Quote, the footage spread to hundreds of worlds within days. Species who had never paid attention to Earth suddenly wanted to know more about humanity. Who were these strange creatures who could endure such insults without breaking? Messages began arriving at the human embassy. The first came from the Velthari delegation. They were a small, peaceful species who had suffered under Sarith control for generations. Their homeworld had been conquered 500 years ago. And though they had eventually won their freedom, they still feared their former masters. We watched your ambassador's response with great interest, their message said. We would like to request a private meeting to discuss potential cooperation. Thomas agreed immediately. More messages followed. The Keth Collective, who had remained strictly neutral in galactic politics for centuries, expressed interest in trade negotiations. The Rithani Federation wanted to discuss cultural exchange programs. Even the mysterious Axiom, the ancient crystalline being who led the Concord, sent a brief note expressing curiosity about human philosophy. In one night, without raising his voice or making a single threat, Thomas Reeve had made humanity the most interesting species in the quadrant. Valeth received a summons from home. The Sarith Empress wanted an explanation. How had a simple intimidation tactic, something the Sarith had used successfully for thousands of years, somehow backfired so completely? Why was the entire galaxy suddenly sympathetic to the humans? Why were former Sarith allies now requesting meetings with Earth's embassy? Valeth stood before the Empress's holographic image and had no good answers. You were supposed to discourage them, the Empress said coldly. You were supposed to make them look weak and emotional. Instead, you have made them look strong and wise. You have made us look like bullies attacking a peaceful neighbor. I did not expect, Valeth began. You did not expect a human to control himself, the Empress interrupted. That was your mistake. You assumed all humans were the same. You did not study this particular human carefully enough. Valeth bowed her head. What would you have me do, Empress? Fix this, the Empress commanded. I do not care how. But fix this before the damage spreads further. The hologram disappeared. Valeth stood alone in the dark communication chamber, her hands clenched into fists. The human had beaten her without throwing a single punch. He had won a war she did not even know she was fighting, and somehow she would have to find a way to respond. Meanwhile, in his modest office on the station, Thomas Reeve finished his coffee and started reviewing agricultural exchange proposals. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Grandfather would have been proud. The game was just beginning, and humanity was playing it very well indeed. The message arrived on a quiet morning, 3 weeks after the incident in the Great Hall. Thomas Reeve read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. The Axiom, the eldest and most respected being in the entire galactic concord, was requesting a private meeting with him. Not with Earth's government, not with a committee of human leaders, just with Thomas himself. This had never happened before. The Axiom had observed galactic politics for over 40,000 years. It had watched empires rise and fall. It had seen countless species join the Concord, and countless others fade into extinction. In all that time, it had never shown personal interest in any individual from a young species. Until now, Thomas put on his best suit and made his way to the Axiom's chamber. The chamber was unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. There were no walls in the traditional sense. The room seemed to exist in its own pocket of space, surrounded by slowly spinning galaxies and distant stars. The floor was made of something that looked like solid light. Thomas could feel warmth rising through his shoes, as if the floor itself was alive. And in the center of the chamber floated the Axiom. It was beautiful. That was the only word Thomas could find. The Axiom appeared to be made entirely of living crystal, thousands of facets that caught and reflected light in constantly changing patterns. Its shape was vaguely humanoid, but also somehow plant-like. with branches of crystal extending outward like the limbs of an ancient tree. Ambassador Reeve, the axiom said. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Thomas bowed respectfully. The honor is entirely mine. I never imagined I would have the opportunity to meet you in person. Please, sit. A chair made of the same solid light appeared behind Thomas. He sat down carefully, half expecting to fall through it. But it held him firmly, comfortably. I have been watching your species with great interest, the axiom began. You are very young. By galactic standards, humanity has existed for less than the blink of an eye. And yet, the axiom paused. Its crystal facets shifted colors slowly, from blue to purple to gold. And yet there is something different about you. Something I have not seen before. Thomas waited patiently. I observed your encounter with High Commandant Valeth, the axiom continued. I have watched that recording 17 times. Each time, I find myself more curious. May I ask what makes you curious? Thomas asked. Her insults were severe. She attacked everything your species holds dear. Your strength, your intelligence, your right to exist among the stars. Any other species would have responded with anger. The Velthari would have wept. The Keth would have clicked their rage. The Rithani would have demanded formal apology through legal channels. The axiom's crystals pulsed with soft light. But you did none of these things. You simply walked away. Thomas nodded slowly. Yes, I did. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Thomas could feel its weight. This was not small talk. The axiom genuinely wanted to understand, because responding with anger would have meant losing, Thomas said carefully. Valeth wanted me to react. She needed me to react. My anger would have been her victory. The only way to deny her that victory was to refuse to play her game. But did you not feel the anger? The axiom asked. I have studied human biology. Your heart rate increased during her speech. Your body prepared for conflict. The anger was there. Inside you. How did you prevent it from controlling your actions? Thomas was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Among my people, he said finally, there is an old teaching. It says that between what happens to us and how we respond, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom. In that space lies our power. No matter what anyone does to us, they cannot take away our ability to choose how we respond. The axiom's crystals flickered rapidly. Thomas suspected this was the equivalent of intense thought. This is remarkable, the axiom said. Most species believe that strength means the ability to destroy your enemies. The ability to dominate. The ability to make others fear you. Humanity used to believe that too, Thomas admitted. For thousands of years, we measured strength by who could hurt others the most. We fought endless wars. We destroyed our own planet. We came very close to ending ourselves completely. Yet you survived. We survived because we learned. Thomas leaned forward in his chair. We learned that true strength is not about destruction. True strength is about endurance. It is about the ability to absorb pain and keep going. It is about choosing peace when war would be easier. It is about extending a hand to someone who has just struck you. The axiom was silent for a long time. The galaxies spinning around them seemed to slow down, as if the universe itself was listening. How do you measure strength then? The axiom finally asked. If not by dominance, then by what? Thomas considered the question carefully. It was perhaps the most important question anyone had ever asked him. We measure strength by hope, he said. By the stubborn, irrational belief that tomorrow can be better than today. By the choice to build instead of destroy. By the courage to be kind when cruelty would be easier. He paused. Valeth called us weak because we die quickly. But I think our short lives are actually our greatest strength. We know we do not have forever. So we must make every moment matter. We must build things that will last beyond us. We must love fiercely and forgive quickly, because we do not have time to waste on hatred. The axiom made a sound that Thomas had never heard before. It was like crystal singing, like light becoming music. The translators built into his earpiece struggled for a moment, then offered a single word. Fascinating. They talked for 3 more hours. By the time Thomas left the chamber, he knew that something important had happened. He did not know exactly what it would mean for humanity's future, but he knew it would mean something. 6 months had passed since the night in the Great Hall. High Commandant Valeth stood at the window of her quarters, staring out at the stars. She had not slept well in weeks. Every report that crossed her desk brought more bad news. Every message from home carried more disappointment from the Empress. The Seraph Dominion was falling apart. Not through war, not through conquest, not through any of the methods that the Seraph understood and respected. No. Their empire was crumbling through something far more dangerous. They were being ignored. The species that had once feared the Seraph were now forming new alliances, and most of those alliances included Earth. The Velthari had signed a trade agreement with humanity. The Keth Collective had opened their borders to human scientists. The Rithani Federation had invited human artists to their cultural festivals. Even the Axiom had spoken publicly about its conversation with Ambassador Reeve. The ancient being had called humanity a species worth watching, and had suggested that the galaxy could learn much from their philosophy of patience and hope. Meanwhile, the Seraph received fewer invitations to diplomatic events. Their trade proposals were politely declined. Their military alliances weakened as former partners sought new friends, all because of one human who had refused to get angry. Valeth requested a formal meeting with Ambassador Reeve. She told herself it was strategy. She told herself she was following the Empress's orders to fix the damage, but deep inside, she knew there was another reason. She wanted to understand. Thomas agreed to meet her without hesitation. He did not ask for conditions or guarantees. He simply said yes. They met in a small conference room on the neutral section of the station. No cameras. No other delegates. Just the two of them. Sitting across a simple table, Valeth studied the human carefully. He looked exactly the same as he had that night, calm, patient, unafraid. There was no hatred in his eyes, no satisfaction at her difficulties, just quiet attention. "You have caused great problems for my people," Valeth began. Thomas nodded. "I am aware of the changes in the political situation." "Changes." Valeth made a sound of frustration. "You call them changes. I call them disasters. The Dominion has lost 3 trade partnerships this month alone. Our military alliances are weakening. Species that once trembled at our name now laugh behind our backs." "I am sorry to hear that," Thomas said. And somehow, Valeth believed he meant it. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you be sorry? We are your enemies. I insulted you before the entire galaxy. You should be celebrating our difficulties." Thomas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I do not consider you my enemy, High Commandant." "I never did." Valeth stared at him. "That makes no sense. I attacked you. I attacked your entire species." "You attacked with words," Thomas said. "Words can hurt, but they do not have to create permanent enemies. I chose not to let your words define our relationship." "Tom, but why?" Valeth leaned forward, genuinely confused. "In your position, I would have sought revenge. I would have used every tool available to destroy the one who humiliated me." Thomas smiled slightly. "And that is exactly why the Dominion is struggling now. You expected revenge. You prepared for revenge. Your entire strategy was built around responding to revenge. When I chose a different path, you had no plan." Valeth felt a chill run down her spine. He was right. He was absolutely right. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "You have the advantage now. Name your price." Thomas shook his head. "I do not want anything from you, High Commandant." "Not in the way you mean." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. He placed it on the table between them. "What is this?" Valeth asked suspiciously. "Information," Thomas said. "About the crop failures in your outer colonies. Valith's blood turned cold. The crop failures were the Dominion's greatest secret. Their outer colonies were struggling to produce enough food. If other species learned of this weakness, the Seraph would face challenges from every direction. "How did you learn about this?" she whispered. "Humanity is good at gathering information," Thomas said simply. "We have been doing it for our entire history. But that is not important. What is important is what I am offering you." "And what is that?" "Help." Thomas pushed the data chip closer to her. "Earth has developed advanced agricultural technology. We can help your colonies recover their food production. We can solve this problem before it becomes a crisis." Valith could not believe what she was hearing. "You would help us? After everything I said? After everything the Dominion has done to oppose humanity?" "Yes." "Why?" Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Because helping you costs us nothing but time and resources. Because solving this problem will save millions of lives in your colonies. Because I believe that kindness is stronger than cruelty. And I want to prove it." He paused, then added, "There is one condition." Valith tensed. Here it was, the trap. The demand for power, or territory, or submission. "What condition?" "There is a resolution before the Concord," Thomas said. "A document on basic rights for all sentient beings. The Seraph have blocked this resolution for 300 years. I want you to support it." Valith blinked. "That is all? A vote on a piece of paper?" "That piece of paper will protect billions of beings across the galaxy," Thomas said quietly. "It will establish that every sentient creature has value. It will be your people's gift to the future." He stood up and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. "I do not consider you an enemy, High Commandant. I consider you a future ally who has not realized it yet. When you are ready to accept that, I will be here." He left the room. Valith sat alone with the data chip, her world changing around her. The vote took place on a bright morning in the Great Hall. Delegates from every member species had gathered to witness history. The resolution on basic sentient rights had been debated for 300 years. Every time it came to a vote, the Seraph Dominion blocked it. Their opposition had become so predictable that many species had stopped hoping. But today felt different. Thomas Reeve stood in the human section of the hall, watching quietly. Sarah Chen stood beside him, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Do you think she will do it?" Sarah whispered. Thomas did not answer. He simply watched the Seraph delegation enter the hall. High Commandant Valith walked at the front. Her dark scales gleamed under the lights. Her golden eyes swept across the room, taking in every face, every camera, every watching eye in the galaxy. She looked different somehow. Sarah could not explain it. The arrogance was still there, but something else had joined it. Something softer. Something almost like doubt. The axiom called the assembly to order. Its crystalline voice filled the hall. "We gather today to vote on Resolution 7749, the Declaration of Basic Sentient Rights. This resolution establishes that every sentient being, regardless of species, origin, or capability, possesses inherent dignity and value. It has been debated for 3 centuries. Today, we will finally decide its fate." The hall fell silent. "All delegations in favor of the resolution, please indicate now." Lights began appearing across the hall. The Velthari voted yes. The Keth Collective voted yes. The Rethani Federation voted yes. One by one, species added their support. Then every eye turned to the Seraph delegation. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Valith stood completely still. Thomas could see the conflict on her face, the weight of 300 years of tradition fighting against something new. Then she raised her hand. "The Seraph Dominion votes yes." The hall exploded into noise. Delegates shouted in surprise. Cameras flashed. Commentators began talking rapidly into their devices. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. The resolution passed unanimously. The celebration lasted for days. Species that had suffered without protection for centuries finally had official recognition of their rights. Beings who had been treated as property now had legal standing in galactic courts. It was not perfect, no document could solve every problem, but it was a beginning. And everyone knew that humanity had made it possible. Thomas Reeve became famous across the galaxy. News networks requested interviews. Universities invited him to speak. Books were written about his conversation with the Axiom and his strange method of responding to insults with silence. But Thomas did not seek attention. He continued his work at the embassy, reading reports, attending meetings, building relationships one conversation at a time. When reporters asked about his role in the resolution, he always redirected the credit. "This was a victory for everyone," he would say. "I simply helped people see what was already possible." Valeth returned home to face the Empress. She expected punishment. She had broken 3 centuries of Sereth tradition. She had supported a document that limited Sereth power. She had shown weakness before the entire galaxy. But the Empress surprised her. "You did well," the Empress said quietly. Valeth looked up in shock. "Empress? Our empire was dying, Valeth. Not from war, but from isolation. We had made ourselves so frightening that no one wanted to be near us. We had no friends, only subjects who hated us and waited for chances to escape." The Empress rose from her throne and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of the Sereth homeworld glittered like scattered jewels. "The human showed you another way. A way to be strong without being cruel. A way to lead without being feared." She turned back to Valeth. "I want you to learn everything you can from him. I want you to bring that knowledge back to our people." Valeth bowed her head. "Yes, Empress. The galaxy is changing," the Empress continued. "Species that were weak are becoming strong. Species that were strong are becoming weak. The Sereth must change too, or we will be left behind." She placed a hand on Valeth's shoulder. "You will be my heir. When I am gone, you will lead our people into this new era. Learn well, Valeth. The future depends on it." Years passed. Thomas Reeve served as ambassador for 12 more years. He trained dozens of young diplomats, teaching them the philosophy of patience and hope. He built relationships with species across the galaxy, turning strangers into friends and enemies into allies. When he finally retired, he returned to Earth to a small house by the ocean, where he could watch the waves and remember the stars. The Sereth Dominion transformed slowly, under Valeth's eventual leadership. She became Empress 20 years after the resolution, and she never forgot the lesson Thomas had taught her. The hand extended when a fist was expected. The kindness offered when cruelty was deserved. She visited him once, near the end of his life. They sat on his porch and watched the sunset together. "I hated you," she admitted. "That night in the Great Hall. I hated you more than I had ever hated anyone." Thomas smiled. "I know. How did you know I would change?" Thomas thought about the question for a long moment. "I did not know," he said finally. "I only hoped. Hope is all any of us ever have." Valeth nodded slowly. "Your grandfather taught you well." "Yes," Thomas agreed. "He did." Thomas Reeve died peacefully at 93 years old, surrounded by family. His granddaughter held his hand at the end. She later told reporters that his final words were simple. "We got there. We actually got there." The galaxy mourned him. The Axiom declared a day of remembrance. The Sereth Empress ordered flags lowered across the Dominion. But Thomas would not have wanted monuments or speeches. He would have wanted people to remember the lesson, that true strength is not the ability to destroy, that patience is more powerful than anger, that a hand extended in kindness can change the universe, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply turn around and walk away. The end.